If only one person is giving, that person will eventually run out of energy and will have nothing left to give. It's just two selfish people kind of just having essentially another roommate, you know, in the house. It's easy to look on the other person to do everything, you know, to expect the other person to carry the weight and you get to do what you want. Focus on self is what I saw over and over would destroy relations.
So, in your experience, what is the biggest characteristic needed for a successful relationship? And I'll just say relationship.
Yeah. I think that people go into a relationship thinking or asking the question of themselves of who's going to make a good partner for me? And that, you know, what's going to work for me? What am I looking for? And the question is always focused on them. And I think through everything I've seen and read that the important question is not looking for this ideal partner, but becoming an ideal partner. So turning that question around and focusing on yourself and asking things, you know, asking yourself things like, you know, and as you meet guys or girls and you date, you know, how can I serve this person better? How can I, you know, the focus not being you, but being them.
But then it has to come from both the sides too.
It has to. But, and it's important then for you to, if you're doing that outward focus on the other person, you should quickly be able to determine, is this person
even right
outward
for me?
Focused on me? Right. Are they out? Because if you are, you've got this wonderful, edifying, constructive relationship. But if only one person is giving, then you do not. That person will eventually run out of energy and will have nothing left to give. And if it's two people that are not focusing on the other person, it's just two selfish people kind of just having essentially another roommate, you know, in the house.
And what is the biggest reason in your experience that relationships stumble?
I think,
not even marriage, I would just say
any relationships. I think it goes back to this, to this answer I just gave, which is it's a focus on self, you know, and Keller called it selfishness, how marriage reveals selfishness. Because, you know, it's easy to look on the other person to do everything, you know, to expect the other person to carry the weight and you get to do what you want. That's, you know,
so like selfishness and expectations.
Exactly. And marriage reveals a lot of that because, you know, when your partner says, could you help me with X? And at that moment, you're doing something you really, really are enjoying. Do you drop what you're doing, even as much as you like it, and say, I'd be glad to help you? Or do you just sit there and say, I'm busy right now. I'll wait till the game is over. Wait till I'm done playing with my friend, you know, this round of golf, even though there's a big need on the part of your partner. So yeah, it does reveal selfishness. And I think focus on self is what I saw over and over would destroy relationships.
What about conflict resolution?
Great question. And
because that's a big part of a relationship.
Huge. And when we bring that up with idealistic couples, they almost want to tell us, no, you don't need to cover that. We are just so in love. We've agreed on everything. And it's like, no, I think this would be good for you guys to go through. And in conflict resolution, what is, again, number one, and Nama, you mentioned this earlier
communication.
on. Communication. Yes. It's almost like out of every section, this is important.
Well, I even tell kids that communicate. Yes. You have to have the communication channel open. I just feel it is so important.
Exactly.
There is nothing that cannot be solved if you communicate.
Correct. That's exactly right. There's several types of communication which are not edifying. One is communicating truth without love. If you communicate truth without love, what comes out may be true, but in a very harsh way that can tear down the other person.
And do you mean the tone or just the context?
Or even the context or even the words, all of that. So I would say all of that can be a part of it. And then you can flip that around and say another form of unhelpful communication is love without truth. And that's where you're not addressing the issue, kind of the elephant in the room. It's just sentimentality. You don't, you're not, there's not a forthrightness, in you to say, this is what's bothering me, or this is what happened.
Maintaining an illusion of connection.
Correct. Exactly. So you can go on to those two extremes.
It's more harmful, I think.
Yes, it is, because you're overlooking things. You think to yourself, well, because I love him or her, I'm not going to bring this up. I'm just going to, suffer with this. And that other person may not even see that issue that is bothering.
That is important, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes when we hear in arguments and we talk about truth with love, we recommend on couples in kind of good conflict resolution never to make the other person the focus of your words. Focus on what occurred and you, not the other person.
Yeah.
To say things like, that was such a stupid thing you did. Or you were so intolerant. You were so insensitive.
Again, you keep coming back to communication and the way you talk and how you talk and what you say. Yeah.
And taking that same situation around where, say at a gathering, you felt ignored with your partner. And later on, rather than saying you were selfish, you don't care about, you, to turn around and say, let me tell you how I felt. I felt abandoned by you. I felt I wasn't important to you. So you focus on that, and it turns it, as opposed to attacking the other person for being X. Yeah. Now this is what I feel. Let's discuss that, and that's a much healthier way to address things. We also talk about timing of disagreements, and we underscore.
What do you mean timing?
We tell people that you never, ever, unless it's dire need, you never ever address your partner in public about a disagreement. So that's the big part of timing. You want to, can I talk to you if you need to do in the moment, and then you go somewhere else. But another part of timing, and this ties into personality. For example, you've got an extrovert and an introvert, married or together, and at the end of the day, they're both coming home from work. The extrovert has 100 things that they want to share with their introvert spouse about what happened at work. A lot of wonderful things. The introvert spouse has finished a heavy day at work, a lot of talking with people, meetings, things that person doesn't necessarily, and they want to come home and be quiet for an hour and just sit and just be with their own thoughts. Two different people, two very valid things, but each one is processing differently, and they have to understand each other. And we'd recommend to the extrovert, to the introvert in that situation, when the extrovert is just coming at you, to say, do you mind if we just give me an hour, and in an hour or in 45 minutes, let me finish reading this, let me finish preparing the meal, and then in an hour we can discuss the big thing that happened at work. Well, similar thing with disagreements. Different people process things differently.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are some of us personality types that want to fix that problem right away. You got upset because of something, or they got upset, and you say, okay, well, what happened? What could I have done differently? The other person may be a person that says, I just need to be alone right now. I just need to process. If I talk right now, I may say something that I regret.
Yeah.
I need to, and it's frustrating for the person that wants it fixed now.
Wants to talk, yeah.
Exactly. But for the person that needs to process this and be by themselves
you need to give them space.
Give them space. And it may be that whole evening you don't talk about it, but you come back next evening. And then the person needs space, then needs to understand, the other person's looking for resolution at least next evening.
So it's again about two people understanding each other.
Exactly. And that give and take of, okay, we don't talk about it now, but we need to talk about it tomorrow. And the person wants to take 3 days. Okay, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Just give me a little bit of time. So it's that compromise that makes it important. But it's understanding who your partner is and what you are, what your needs are.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is a lot.
Did you enjoy? Enjoy
we
is
did.
A wrong choice of word, but you know what I'm saying.
We did. It
Okay.
was somewhat energizing in that you've got a younger couple. Typically, they're either engaged on the way to marriage, and and you mentioned earlier, the planning was going on and so forth, and there was great excitement. So that was wonderful to us. And in general, we had couples that were there because they wanted to be. And so they were kind of hanging on all our advice. And, we shared, kind of openly things that we had done that had not, that had not gone as well, and things that we've learned and done better. And they really ate that. They loved that more than talking about the books and the tests, all of which are good. They loved hearing stories about our marriage and where we've kind of stubbed our toes and, and what
I think that always helps.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they remember those stories more than anything else we talk about and take that with them.
So based on your experience, if for a couple who are ready to get engaged or say get into a serious long-term commitment, what are the 3 things, mandatory things, that you feel they should ask each other to make sure their answers are in alignment? And I know important things can mean different for different person.
Right.
For me, communication may be a big thing. For somebody else, it may be something very small and they don't really, care about it. But in your experience.
Yeah. I think that understanding ourselves and the other person, and it takes conscious effort to really think through and ask yourself, okay, how am I personality-wise when it comes to this or that? And what am I seeing in the other person? That takes a little bit of effort, mental work, and not everyone wants to do that. Particularly if you're early on in a dating relationship and you're just being swept by this river of very positive emotions. But I would say try to understand from a personality standpoint what your partner is and is not and what you are. I think if you understand that, then you're halfway there.
Yeah, but what can they ask each other?
Each
questions,
other?
To make sure that the answers are in alignment.
Yes.
Because for me, it could be communication, beliefs, how you show up, but it could be different for somebody else.
Right.
But
right.
based on your experience, what you have done, what do you think are 3 mandatory things that they should ask?
That they should ask one another? Well, as far as the very practical, practical questions, I would say a lot of that is driven by what are the really important things for you? Do you view yourself, for example, as a career woman? Do you view yourself as a mom? Do you view yourself as both of those? And so I would kind of get to the question of if it's moving, the relationship's moving along, of what do you see and expect in a husband, and what do you see and expect in a wife, and hear what their answer is. And not that that's disqualifying, because we've said earlier how important communication is, and to be able to frankly say, well, that's not how I see myself as a wife, or at least that aspect, or husband, this aspect. I see myself as X. I see my wife as Y. And that hopefully it shouldn't be a disqualifying thing, but at least something to talk about. Oh, well, let's discuss that. And why are you saying that? Why are you saying that you want this or you don't want that? So I would say that's one of the big pieces that you have in there. Other things to ask. Earlier you reacted to financial management, which is so many times the source of so many disagreements in marriages. And so getting an understanding of, I think the healthiest way to approach financial management is for finances to be shared. Not all couples do that. Some keep their financial lives separate. And I think long term that can be very destructive to a relationship, because you're saying essentially part of my life is just mine. And, a long-term relationship, whether marriage or just a long-term relationship period, is about sharing everything, kind of becoming one. And that's not accomplishing that. So, since finances form such a potential roadblock to healthy relationships, to find out, one, are we sharing our finances? Are we together? And 2, what are some of our goals, in financial goals, and how do you achieve those? The whole concept of budgeting or not budgeting. You have one person, one of the couple likes to spend a lot, and they just like, things and toys and travel or whatever it is. The other person tends to be very disciplined, and they don't want to spend those. So how do you, work those things out. So to understand that from the other person and say, let's talk about finances, let's talk about budgeting. What are your financial goals? What would you like to do? So I think that's the second important one. And another area that can also trip up couples are family. Often potential in-laws can be a stumbling block. They can, we hear about, we see a lot of, a mom or a dad that doesn't particularly like that boy or girl that's dating your son or daughter. And they can be very, vocal about it. And it's in many cases can carry through into marriage, and kind of sap a lot of the energy out of that marriage as that continues. So it's kind of, I guess the question there would be, what do your parents, what does your family think of me? Again, this is a relationship that's farther along, but I think that's an important question to ask. And, and friends, I mean, what is their feedback? And asking the other person, how do you feel with my mom and dad? And hearing what they say.
Yeah.
Because in some cases it might be, well, your mom or dad doesn't include me in things I feel that, and it's something that person, the son or the daughter can take back to her family and say, you're not supporting this person enough in these ways. Could you please, do these things? So I think that's another, if you look at two practical stumbling blocks, I think in long-term relationship marriage, it's financial and it's family aspect to it.
That's more common that you have.
Yes, those are quite common. And the big overall, and this is not necessarily a question, but again, going back to the earlier things I've said, the big overall success of a relationship has to be on how focused is that person on you, and then asking yourself that same question of how focused am I on them? Am I willing to serve them and their needs and so forth? And are they willing to do that to me? And if both people are giving to one another, you're just going to have a home run of a relationship.
Yeah.
I've never, in all that crisis marriage, I never had any of those marriages say, this person does too much for me. I'm just getting out.
Yeah.
You have typically either one person giving and the other person not, and there's that selfishness, and that person eventually just runs out of batteries. You run out of energy. Or two people who are just independent. And we often they refer to their marriages as rooming situations.
Wow. There's so much.
There's a lot there, but that's relationships. That's what they're like. Relationships are.
And I mean, totally. I think all these things, it's better that you talk about it before you get into an engagement
oh my gosh.
or a marriage.
Exactly.
And sort it out.
Right. Exactly. And I think, premarital counseling provides the tools, the context to do that, and to help you think through the various.
I mean, at least it can get you thinking.
Exactly. It gets it right. There's no, special questions or something.
No.
It's just things that you
we
go,
just went into more detail about it.
That's a good thing that we could talk about.
That
and
at least
bringing it up.
they can start thinking and bringing up a little conversation, because dating is not just going to movies and having dinner and
exactly, and holding hands
a
and
good
walking in the
time.
park. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean that too, but
all that is great.
Yeah.
But that's it's I'm going to talk a little. I'm going to mention now a little country singer, Willie Nelson. He had a song where in the middle of the song he has this great insight about marriage, and in it, the lyric is, "I didn't love you as often as I should have." Okay. And it's in the midst of this regret of being with this woman, but it's interesting that the context of that is, I didn't love you as often, kind of a verb, as opposed to you expect, I just didn't love you, period, as often. And to me, that speaks about that. What he was trying to say is, I didn't do enough for you. I didn't give enough of myself to you, and it's that action. Love, yes, love is emotions, but love is an action. It's what we do for the other person. It's not thinking of myself, but thinking, what's going to make this, my spouse, happy in the sense of what's going to make them full. What can I do for them? So how can I love them more often? So actions, often implies actions. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And you talk about all this during the premarital counseling?
It comes out at some point. There's a lot of notes. Again, we typically meet probably 5
How
to
many
6
sessions?
different-
I was going to ask
Yeah.
you that. Typically, how many
It's
sessions do
typically
couples
about
take?
5 to 6 different sessions. Each one's about maybe 2 hours long. They also, in our context, what what our church did is they also have group meetings that meet together prior to these, and they meet with, for example, a professional financial planner when we're covering finances, and then
Okay.
they'll come to the mentor couple, and we'll talk about more practically how to handle finances. And we'll look at their individual answers to questions and address those. So it's kind of goes hand in hand, kind of the professional along with a mentor couple like us.
Any particular examples that stand out
When
with
it-
couples?
As far as
Premarital counseling, like something that you have seen that you still remember it.
that I still remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we end, our last session, we tell them, please don't ever feel that you've got nowhere to turn if there's some issues in the marriage that that seem a little insurmountable. You may have a church, you may have friends, you may have family that you can go to, which is great. But if you don't, always feel like you can call us. We're here. You got our phone number. Doesn't matter how many years down the road. We'll be
is
glad
really
to
nice. Yeah,
do that.
yeah.
And we had a couple, probably about 5-6 years into marriage. They had a young child already. And they called us one time and said, we're having some issues. And would you guys mind listening in? They had moved to Texas by that time, but we all got on the phone, and over the period of an hour and a subsequent call, we kind of helped them listen to one another and talk through some of their issues. And they're still married today. So we feel like we played a little role in that. But what really impressed me is or about them is that they could have easily brushed off what we said. And it takes, some degree of humility, to say, we're having some problems and we can't fix them right now. Can you help us? And for many couples, they wouldn't get to that point of saying that. But I appreciated that they were able to do that, called us, and I think we were able to help them through it.
Yeah, no, this was really a lot of good information.
Yeah.
So before we end, if there is one thing that you can tell kids or people who are dating, couples, not married yet, not engaged yet, long-term committed relationship, what would it be?
Be the person that you want to admire in someone else. If you are looking, for this soulmate that is honest and loving and thoughtful and compassionate, look to yourself and become that, so that that other person is finding that same thing in you.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Will.
You're very welcome.
This was a really lot of good information. I learned a lot too. Like I said, I did not know about premarital counseling for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
But everything that you said, it's just so true. And yeah.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate, this time we had, and hopefully it'll be of some help to some of your listeners.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.